hear me now?
I know a Polish sound guy. I know a Czech one too.
Good. All right, good evening and welcome to the City Council Conference of Tuesday, May 27th, 2025. One item on the agenda is discussion regarding Community Wildfire Protection Plan. James, you have the floor.
Hello, I'm James Briggs, Park Development Manager, Parks Department. So why is Parks here talking about wildfire? Just for a second, why? Because the Forester, Collins Inc., and the Forestry Division is housed in Parks. And yes, fire is mostly the purview of the fire department, but a lot of the money that helps you do things to do wildfire protection plan comes through Forestry Service and things like that. So Colin, we asked in the budget to get some funding in our annual tree program to put together a community wildfire protection plan, a thing that you have to have in place in order to qualify for a lot of things that you want to do. Because we all watched what happened in Maui, and then we watched LA, and then we watched North Carolina this year, and there's things that you want to be prepared for. So without stealing anyone's thunder, we RFP'd and found a native-owned company out of Oklahoma City that does this kind of thing. Our friends from Chileta are here, so I will let them introduce themselves, but that's sort of this is step one in a multi-step process. Obviously, fire is also here, and they've been our partners throughout, but we've gone through quite a process to get some stakeholders and a lot of information, a lot of conversation with fire departments and every part of town. Rural parts are particularly susceptible. I'll let Lexi and the gang go through that, but I'm gonna get out of this chair and let the actual presenter come up and introduce and talk.
Chicken.
Yeah, exactly.
Lexi Womack. I am the emergency management planner here at Chileta, so I was the one that actually developed and wrote this plan. So yeah.
Nathan Lilly. I'm the project manager for Chileta in the risk asset management protection vertical. We have three different verticals for Chileta. One is emergency management, which is what Lexi's in, and we have a environmental and infrastructure vertical. So this plan kind of fit fire, infrastructure, as well as emergency management. So we're honored to be selected as the contractor to be able to put this plan together. I know a few years ago, you all put a plan together and the money didn't get funded through the grants that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So this is the one we hope to get funded for money in the future of getting these sort of mitigation projects kicked off. So go ahead. So yeah, we'll just go through the introduction of what a CWPP is, what the planning areas look like. We did get to drive around and graciously hosted by the assistant fire chief and his staff. We get to go to each fire station and meet with all of them, talk about different concerns they've had, being on the ones, boots on the ground, right? That's what we want to hear about. We can look at all the data we want, all the maps we can see, but listening to the firefighters themselves, where they're seeing the most threat and risk was really beneficial for this. And, being in Oklahoma, we've done a lot of wildfire mitigation plans, but they're always usually not in Oklahoma. There's only about 8 to 10 actual CWPPs that have been approved in Oklahoma. So you're in the early stages of getting this done. Ours are Oregon, Washington. You're seeing a lot more in California. So it's nice just to be able to drive down the road and really look at some things. We have questions or need or comments or so. Yeah. So what is the CWPP? Is there you read? I guess you all read that last night. You got your homework, got the notes, got it. Yeah, I figured you did. It's only 98 pages. So this plan is really to establish a long-term focus for not only community awareness, which comes in education, but looking at hardening of your infrastructures as well. So you're doing zoning and there's HOAs going up. What's that look like for them? Can you implement certain building requirements through this, as well as funding? So that's the big thing, grant funding, not only state, but federal. That is the big one, is getting federal funding. We've seen some of this funding range from $10,000 to $10 million. Just depends on what you can actually get through and what you need. It's somewhat realistic. A lot of times, the big ones we've seen were in California with power companies. And so having a partner here, I believe the power company that was local came to a stakeholder meeting and they want to be a part of it. And that's a huge step forward. Them understanding that they are part of the risk is an opportunity, I think, to maybe set yourselves apart in Oklahoma when it comes to the funding. So it's based on regional funding. They have certain funding for different states and broken down into either you have tribes as well as a stakeholder. So your footprint for stakeholders is a lot more than I've seen. So I think that's going to be the advantage when you're getting to write this next grant. So, but yeah, again, it's reducing a lot of watersheds, as we know, you going into Lake Thunderbird, and then again the federal funding. So it got started in 2003 with the Healthy Forest and Restoration Act. That was how it got kicked off. It was to kind of push the federal government to understanding that they need to look at local and not just national scale funding for reduced mitigation and prevention. So that's been the big focus in 2003. I wish I don't know what the number is. It's been distributed over the last 20-something years, but we can definitely get that for you and give you a perspective of what it looks like every year they're putting out there. So, communities at risk and wildfire urban interface. Does everyone know what WUI means? So WUI is and there's a few slides coming up. It's where humans and nature come together when it comes to wildfires. When, as you know, you all have been approving and going through your long-term plan for the sprawl going east towards Lake Thunderbird and how that looks. And that's what you're doing is you're building more of a footprint in the WUI area. Right now, it's the edges, and you'll have some of the WUI out in the rural where there's maybe a few homes. That really isn't WUI. WUI is where it touches a massed concentration of homes and people. And so you're gonna really have to plan that in the future, what that looks like, and start doing these mitigations now as you're looking into the future of where you're really zoning those residential and commercial places out, so. Planning area, it's just your city limits. That was, I grew up in Oklahoma. I spent 20 years with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, fighting wildland fires, and I've spent a lot of time, I actually cut a lot of cedars on the east side way back when I had hair, and I didn't realize how big Norman was when it came to city limits. I had no idea, and it's pretty impressive what you all are planning for every day. So hats off for sure. So with this, we were able to gather some numbers, and I think that's something the Assistant Fire Chief and I talked a little bit about, is the data. So prior to a new system that got in place, which it sounds like the new system is showing locations of fires, which is the most important thing, lat and longs. Prior to that, it was throwing every fire in the city of Norman. That's just, when a dispatch went out, it just put it right where it was. There wasn't an actual location. So when you look at these numbers, unfortunately, we can't run our models as well because 3,400 fires showing outside fires, those could be just a barbecue fire, or was it a true fire outside the city limits or an outside fire? So the numbers we had, I mean, those are accurate, but as we're moving forward, you're gonna get real intel of these fires outside or within the WUI area, which is exciting stuff. As you collect every year, make sure you're, if it's another consulting firm or whoever you need, or maybe it's forestry or parks, look at those numbers, see where those fires are happening. So that's gonna also build your next year's plan and your next year's plan. If you're doing the right treatments, the right areas, you should see less fires in those areas. That's kind of the purpose of seeing that data in your hands. So this is what we had so we call large fires, usually over 100 acres. We kind of found some smaller ones. So these are on the national fire list. So NIFC puts out this kind of data set you can pull into your maps. But one of your big ones was obviously in 2012, the 7,000 acre fire. Those are ones we want to reduce. Those are the ones where you're looking at this cross boundary. You couldn't prevent the fire starting, but could you prevent it from going any further into your actual area or city limits? And so this is what we're going to look at using the data that we collected, especially from the firefighters, what they had happening on the ground during these fires, putting this whole plan together to then future have these fuel management plans that also need to be constructed later on. That'll come with funding. So yeah, go. So this is that kind of WUI that we talked about. Identifies where the treatments should probably go starting in future treatments where that intersect between human and nature and fuels really come together. And so any questions on that? A lot of red, as it should be, because that's where homes are. And so you're gonna start seeing your community plan, the yellow's gonna start shifting, your red's gonna start shifting, and we could run this again on what you're gonna look like in 50 years as well. That's something easily we could do. Like, is this gonna create more WUI? Of course it will. You're moving out east. And this all has to do with fuel type as well. We had to change a lot of fuel type. Some national fuel types, which is what happened on the last community wildfire protection plan. We had to manipulate those. It's showing a lot of non-burnable ag. When ag burns, that's the majority of what happens at least on your west side towards the flats, is fires get caused by agriculture, and then they go into the neighborhoods. So, yeah. So this is one of those. It's more of a comprehensive fire model that we're using. It really just shows zoning up these high vet areas of the interface between humans and this kind of, depending on the fuel type, where you're going to see the most risk. And so you're red. let's just give it that. You're always, and I think that's the most concerning thing is what happened with the last one. It's like, I just can't believe they wouldn't fund you with how much red every map showed. It was just like, how much more red can we get without it just being a big red dot? So we're getting there besides the lake. So maybe that's what they got tricked with, was this lake. So vegetation. So this is just a map showing your vegetation. We did have, again, a lot of it was showing non-burnable ag, and that was a lot of the west side was showing a lot of that. We have since been able to change that. A lot of it was showing non-burnable ag to the east, as well as some of the timber. So it kind of switches these national data sets, because you're looking at the entire US. And so they're taking satellite imagery, ag data, and then they give it a vegetation type. Even with how they predict or give cedar a fuel model, it's timber litter. And it doesn't really project what timber litter versus chaparral or sagebrush actually cast embers. And so you really, once you start peeling back the data and giving it what it should be, your numbers exploded, as they should. And so that's what we saw easily, and we knew that was going to happen. And this is that fuel model we're talking about, just another fuel model data set that we're using. Again, that's some of that. So if you see the blue, that TL6, we've adjusted some of that. I believe it was TL1 and 2 before. Grass, even GR2, we're reading a lot of GR1. And grass, GR3 is going to give you more of that casting and higher rates of spread, as well as flame links. Once we run our models, go ahead. So there's your population density, something you're well aware. I'm sure you've seen it. Every meeting is population density. So you're very populated, and you're going to get more populated as you go east. And here's some areas of concern. So when we went around, which is a great tour, we got to visit, I think, almost half of the fire stations. They all came to us, and some of the ones that couldn't make it. And we got to lay out maps, and we got to draw things around, and they kind of told us where these corridors were. Some of the unhoused, where they seeing a lot of fires in those areas. And so we kind of built this areas of concern, this AOC, that how we would recommend now building fuels management plans from these. And that's gonna add into your grant writing and proposal once you submit it. It's like, these are the areas that we want to actually treat. And a part of that, when you build these plans, is looking at resources needs, because you need a lot of resources, as we know. The fire department can only do as much as they can. But when it comes to folks on the ground, I know you're trying to start a prescribed burn a team, and so that's going to take resources. It's going to take vehicles to personnel. Like, there's just so much that goes into that, and all that can come from grant. But let's build that story when we submit it. It's not just going to be submitting this plan. You got to submit now a story that you want to tell. So that's really the next step. When whoever your grant proposal writer is, and we'll be there if you need us. So, so the top three are, you all very aware. Canadian River, that whole corridor, it's nearly 2,500 acres of just constant fires. That is something that, and we'll go through all the areas. Thunderbird, you've got some great partners with Lake Thunderbird. They're doing a lot of treatments around the edges, and so I think just continue to build that relationship with Thunderbird Lake, the state, the BIA, the tribe on the east side, having that land as well. I think you could start in these kind of focus areas because you have the partnerships. They're gonna put money in. There's gonna be a cost share there. I think that's where you really start. So.
Have you already spoken to the Epstein Shawnee and the Potawatomi?
We invited them to the meeting, but I don't think they've gotten back to us. So, but please submit this plan, or we can as well. So yeah, definitely.
Just for reference, back of that slide, it says Royal Oaks Park, 102 acres. Go to the next. It's not actually the park, that's the landmark. So where it says Royal Oaks Park, 102 acres, Hall Park, 617 acres, that's sort of the central landmark, but you'll see on the map. Just don't want anyone to think that we acquired hundreds of more acres of park in each one of these. Just a little context.
So there's the Canadian River. Again, it's going to show you kind of what we were seeing in the fuel model. Again, one of the things is timber litter 6, and the timber litter 2 is once we can manipulate some of those because of what it should be, you're gonna see a lot more emphasis on where a fire can go and where it's gonna go and how much it's gonna cast embers. And then this is kind of the vulnerabilities, as we know, limited access to this whole response area, trying to get a truck down there to stop a fire. You're in sand, you're sinking trucks. There's just no way to get down there to really stop the initial fire. You've been lucky you haven't had any big fires. There's not much fuel there, it seems like sometimes, or it's the right time. It's gonna happen, it's gonna go, and you're just gonna see this kind of into homes, like you're seeing the Palisade. You're gonna get that. It's gonna be grass and timber that's gonna cause this candlestick across, this matchstick. It's gonna be homes, as we've seen on the news all the time. So yeah, this is like one of the main focus areas. I know there were some treatments that I think were done below where you masticated a bunch of land. Was this the one? Where was the one you did a whole huge mastication on? On the river?
State Park did
That was,
some.
The
yeah,
Thunderbird.
that was like,
Yeah, that's Thunderbird.
I thought you
Yeah,
did
they
one
do it
along
at the
the Canadian River. You haven't done one yet? That was the thought, is you just clear it all, then you won't have any issues with the unhoused maybe being in some of those areas and causing some of the fires, which has been one of our, based on our numbers, has been one of the main reasons, so.
Could you define mastication?
Oh,
what that
yes.
is?
So we'd have a huge machine with a big old teeth on it, and it just mows it all down. It looks like
Trees.
trees, mows trees and brush, and it's the most effective thing. Otherwise, you have to cut the tree and then you pile it and then you got to burn it. If you just masticate in those areas, then it just becomes mulch. It just
Okay.
decomposes over time. That's one of the highly recommended areas. If you get too dense, it's not as effective. In this area, it'd be really great, but in some of those 100% canopy cover for large red cedar, it's not. It doesn't. You just have to cut it and burn it. It's not cost effective, or doze it, which is what a lot of HOA or communities are doing to build new homes, is just dozing it. So, all right, thanks. Thunderbird, as we all, I'm sure you've been aware of that one. A lot of treatments going on the east side as well as the west. I think there's just so much opportunity here to really create a long-term plan. The tribe and the state being a part of that, they already have a fuels management plan they sent over, and so I think it's just a matter of putting your name in there and being a part of that. Shouldn't be a problem. Oh yeah, and then just Saxon Park, and we can go through these. Most of you have been around or through them, so again, a lot of it's just going to be: are we going to burn first? Or are we going to masticate or do fuel treatments first, and then we're always going to burn at the end at some point, unless we're just doing straight mastication. Again, it's just, do you have the resources to do it? We could do all this with enough resources, but right now we're kind of hearing we need more help. So, and money is the help. Any questions on these? Keep going. Looks.
James, out at the Mattoon property,
Yes.
we use that mastication system didn't we grind through a bunch of what was
Where
there?
the slope wasn't too bad. I mean, it's pretty, they had to fell a lot of those and just grind them up on site. They were just pushing them through a
Chipper.
yeah, chipper.
We have a third-party contractor
Yes.
doing that for us. Thank you.
Big area. So again, I think this is an opportunity. You're expanding beyond some of your footprint like you talked about, but you're gonna have to. You're gonna have to get the educational awareness for the homeowners. Are they being fire aware, the fire wise? All those educational pieces really come into play when you start looking at some of this area. Some of these corridors, some of we call it green space. I mean, the green space, as beautiful as it is, it's a problem sometimes. And we have to understand how we can still utilize the green space, but also mitigate risk.
I would say with some of the education for homeowners and whatnot, is the benefit of having a plan like this, like lower insurance rates or?
It won't lower insurance rates. It could for them if they decide to do some home hardening, definitely. There's some of that depending on their insurance company. We actually, some of our clients are insurance companies, and we do asset protection for them. And yes, we've seen that. So they do some home hardening. There's defensible space is really the big educational piece of this. It's called defensible space. So you have kind of that 50-foot area around your home that you want to look at. Are you piling your firewood on your porch? Is your porch made of wood? What are your shingles like? And a lot of those are already, depending on where they're at, they could be grandfathered in with their wood shingles, but a lot of them you're moving away from that as homeowners and building codes. So I don't see it too much of an issue. It's just a matter of, does your wood fence back up to tall grass behind it that you don't get to cut? So who should cut it? Who owns that? Is it the HOA doesn't cut it? Is it the owner of the HOA? If it's still owned by the builder versus the homeowners association. So there's some of those you're gonna have to look case by case by case, but building each footprint and then looking at some of those protection areas that you could build. So you could have a buffer around an HOA that could easily knock a fire down once it approaches. So mastication, mowing, just upkeeping those is gonna also be something to look at, whether the state or the city does it.
Would we have access to some of those educational materials that have already been put together by other agencies through you guys? Might you be able to guide us to that? We've got a great communications team, but whether or not recreate that wheel, especially if there have been successful educational campaigns already created.
Yep, there's, especially the fire department, they all have access to all that educational pieces too. And that's the big thing, getting out there, once you have that plan for just, it's each, like I said, it's kind of broken up into some buckets of fuels management planning to education to funding. So like you're gonna have to write plans for each one and really understand where you're gonna go with this. So.
Question about this map in particular around Sutton Place. On the northern border, this is for Daryl, is that the church's property line? I believe so.
Oh,
What road is that right?
Yeah, there. And then the southern border of the neighborhood would be the county's line, and then the eastern border, no, just
Yeah,
up
that's
south of
Griffin
the-
Park right there.
That's the county. Thank you,
James, go
Vanna.
up there and name those landmarks for us.
Well, there's a cemetery. See, you got the cemetery at the corner.
Oh, that's
so-
Robinson at the bottom, okay.
And so
So
where Finch Street dead ends there, I'm calling that the eastern border, so isn't that the city's property there? Or is that state property? I'm just curious.
Robinson on the south edge.
So that's Sutton Place neighborhood right there. So the church is right here.
Right.
That's the church property that goes over to Sutton. Cemetery there, so that's essentially
This is-
state, I mean, that's Griffin Park.
And then this is
And that's the
county.
stuff that goes across from Griffin Park, so that's state
That's
there. And then county would be the fairgrounds and all that area.
Fairgrounds south of the
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Correct, yeah, because there's Sandpiper Lane, Shrill, so that's the part that comes in where the practice soccer goals and all that stuff are, there by the fairgrounds.
Just asking.
And then houses up north of Rock Creek and. So.
I'm just looking for future partnerships as we're trying
County.
to mitigate these.
Absolutely,
Bold red.
it's gonna take those steps. It's gonna take diving into every one of these concern areas and doing the ownership and what can and can't do. It's gonna be a tedious process. It's gonna take some time, but now's the time to do it. The funding's there and. Anything on Stevie Grant? So recommendations, I think this is the takeaway. Obviously, reduce vegetation. That's the big, gotta reduce vegetation. It doesn't have to just be a clear cut too. Think about reducing vegetation. It can still be aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't have to be a complete clear cut. That's part of it, is designing each place differently to make it aesthetically pleasing, inviting, if you could still do it for parks. And then, defensible space, like I just talked about, that's the education piece. Defensible space for homes, what does that look like for them? How do they understand it? It could just be a simple online video they can go watch, link to your community page. They're already out there. There's nothing to recreate some of those stuff. You can just link them. And then, even going to some of your farmers markets, having fire department or whoever set up a booth and talk about what does that defensive space look like? It's easily done. And then emergency response capacity building. So that's something a part of this plan. Are they outside their ability to respond right now? And that's gonna be a question for the fire department. How is it looking? I mean, as you're sprawling east, we all know more resources, more fire stations needed, these things are happening. And so if you can reduce some of that, you're never gonna get rid of having the issues of response, but could you mitigate it so they can get there maybe a few seconds later and it'll be okay? Sometimes not, but reducing that risk is gonna be the hardest part. It's doable. And then infrastructure protection. Let's make sure we identify that in your fire management and fuels management plans. How do we mitigate the smoke? That's a big one. Smoke was a really big concern at the Palisades fire. We're still seeing a lot of claims for smoke and ash. People didn't think about how bad we're talking miles and miles away getting insurance claims because of smoke. And so if we can run models on smoke to hospitals or some of your retirement communities and nursing homes, let's look at that. How can we mitigate those? And then just interagency coordination, so we've been talking about who are the stakeholders. You'll have great rural support between counties. I know I've been on a lot of rural fire department runs and cooperative agreements. And so you already have that network that's already built, which is a lot of people don't. We've seen it. So just keep leaning on those partners to help you in this coordination effort. They'll be there. Funding and resources. Go
I was
ahead.
waiting for you to get through the slide
Go
before.
ahead, I'm sorry.
With evacuation planning and access improvement, one of the things that I got out of the LA fires was businesses, schools, daycares having, and it was a criticism of the government too, not having a coordinated communication plan so people could plan for elderly relatives, childcare, whether they were leaving work or not. Is that kind of what the evacuation planning and access improvement is about?
Absolutely. How can you ensure, and surprisingly how well California, again, not everything they do well, but they did well building out what they thought was a really good evacuation plan there, and it didn't work. I mean, there's no water sometimes, they had to cut the water off. You're gonna get into situations that are just unpreventable, but there are most situations you can prevent, and a part of that evacuation planning will come from emergency management and fire, and for how can you open up certain areas and close certain areas in and out, egress, ingress.
Yeah, I guess also messaging with businesses and schools too, like, hey, this is serious, you should be letting people go so they can take care, escape in time with their stuff.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine live there, and he got a message that they needed to evacuate, but the fire was 2 counties over, and so the messaging went too far, and they're like, wait, why? And it never even ended up getting close to it. So there's a way to kind of geofence that as well, not only data and GIS wise, but education wise. Where are you really? Do you really need to evacuate things?
Yeah.
And as we've seen in Oklahoma, we're used to now. What used to always be, you get the tornado warning for the whole county, and every siren goes off. And now they've kind of have some little geofences around their predictive analysis. And that's kind of what we have to do when it comes to evacuations.
Yeah.
It can't be for everybody.
Well, that's good to hear. It's gonna potentially be more tailored.
Funding. That's where we're at now. So again, put these plans together, figure out what it's gonna cost, and that's the big thing they wanna hear. How much is it gonna cost? That's gonna take some time. And then how long it's gonna take to implement. Those are all things that go in the grant writing. So your grant specialists and writers will be very busy once this plan is approved today. Get going, so. Implement and mitigation measures. Again, you're just gonna have to sit down and really carry out what does this plan look like for each individual area, acres wise. The more you do, sometimes less it costs, right? That's kind of how that works. Can you offset doing mowing and massication? Because massication is very expensive. It's $600 to $900 an acre. Mowing's not. Prescribed burning is very, very cost effective. So can you build a plan? You are gonna stand up a prescribed burn team with your, absolutely. Put that in there. They like to see that probably more than you spending $900 an acre on mastication. What do you need more of? They're all about more acres. Oddly, the government wants to see more things done with cheaper. So that was anyway. Community engagement, like we talked about, the education piece. There's so many different websites out there. We can help you kind of tailor those. But really getting out there, workshops. I think a big one for most of the sprawling metro, HOA education, builders as well. Not just the HOA themselves, but the builders are building and they're not really thinking about how to design for wildfires. They're gonna butt them up right next to a cedar land. It's gonna sit there for 5 years and no one's gonna build across the fence. And so you have this 30-foot solid cedar next to their wooden fence next to all these homes. So is it now required every time a new HOA goes up or you're building a community? There should be a buffer there. You should have at least 2 times the length of the fuel between your asset and the fuel, and they're not. They're bumping them right at next to.
2 times the height of the tree, is that what you're saying?
Correct, yeah. And for cedar, that's not even far enough. Not with the casting and the wind here. That pretty much just, that's a number they use for big timber. Here, the wind is going so much, it really doesn't matter. At least prospectively, you'd be like, oh, that's looks like a good buffer. We can at least maybe hold the defense here with the fire department, maybe not. So, yeah. Again, I just can't emphasize enough what I've seen in the past is not including builders. We include everybody else, but forget about the builders who are the ones putting your homes at risk, essentially. I don't mean it in a bad way, but that's just what it is. And then again, even your utilities, like they were willing to come to the meeting, let's get them involved. You drive down any road, you've got all this fuel underneath these utility lines. Are they required to? Yes. Will they? Don't know. But you can get money for them. That's part of that engagement. We've seen, like I said, $10 million for the PG&E just to do mitigation measures under power lines. I mean, that's a huge chunk. I mean, their budget's $1.5 billion just for wildfire mitigation. So, prospectively, a few $1 million just to clean up underneath power lines in your area is going to go a long way and could prevent a lot of fires and poles tipping over and all these things that happen. So, lastly, thank you, Colin, James, and Assistant Fire Chief Chester. Appreciate it. So we've really enjoyed this project in consultation and just being finally in our backyard. We've not had one, so this has been great. Some of our staff live here in Norman, so it's been great to kind of toss this on their desk, be like, look, we're trying to help you. So, and please put defensible space up, or we're going to send our firefighters out to protect your own home. Anyway, thanks so much. Any questions?
Chief, do you want to input on any of that?
Well, certainly Chief Chester's done a great job being our point on this. As you were going through some of the slides, it brought back some memories to our 2012 fire, 7,000 acres. We've improved greatly on our equipment with our public safety sales tax 2, getting more tanker support. In those days, we had about maybe 2,000 gallons showing up to a fire. Today, we have anywhere from 12 to 20,000 with our own equipment and the agreements we've made with Little Axe, Oklahoma City, Noble. So we've got a lot of help coming in. We talked about prescribed burning. Our fire marshal has done a fantastic job. We've altered our policy to actually allow prescribed burning now. As was stated, staffing is an issue. So when you allow prescribed burning, you've got to devote resources to help that. We're talking about private property too, so educating those people is a big deal. But we've also expanded our burning. So what we allow burning on, if you're zoned agriculturally, we are much more liberal in how we allow people to burn. So yeah, we've done a lot. We've worked with the forestry department, state forestry. They're battling right now inside the government. So I think some of their funding's been cut, but great partner through the years. For about the last 8 years, we did a lot of community engagement and still do around the lake. They're doing prescribed burning around Thunderbird, so they've got that contract currently with the state. Any fire we have, they're certainly one of the first phone calls we make. They help with our air assets and bringing dozer support. They were a big help March 14th. We talked about notifications. We've made great strides there working with PD, our RAVE system. So when we talk about evacuations, we identify that early with whatever fire we're dealing with. We look at protecting in place versus evacuation, and especially on March 14th with our new command center that Major Barber helps manage. We were able to organize very early in that event, getting communication out on what we were trying to do there. So I think we've made great strides over the last decade. Certainly a plan like this, putting it together, combining other agencies, bringing city agencies together. We've never really had the funding to go after a plan like this. One time just before I became fire chief, we were able to get with the state prisons and bring in convicts to do this work. But the public found out about that and that program was ended. So those are the kind of things we've looked at in the past. You get a program like this together, get real money available, and get some people in. We already use the FireWise resources. We've worked with Tiffany several times in the past, putting out how to make your place defensible. That 2012 fire, I was an assistant chief then, and our staffing isn't great now, but it was even worse then, and I was the incident commander for 40 straight hours, the first 40 hours of that fire. We burned obviously 7,000 acres. I think we lost a little over 100 homes. We were literally going by structures, and, you know, if it wasn't defensible, we passed it. You know, so that's our theme now, help us put your fire out. You know, if you don't give us access, if you're not getting your fuel away from your house, it makes it a very tough situation, and our resources can only go so far. So we're gonna go to places where we can defend and we get that message out there. So anyway, hopefully that was some good input. We're certainly thankful for this plan, thankful for Parks coming on board, Colin and his work and his team. And we look forward to trying to get some money in here, and we'll work with whoever we can get and certainly get in on those private properties. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of that money is gonna be for public space, correct? I mean, that's really what the thrust of this is. So certainly the places we own and the places we can control, we can certainly make a dent in.
So, Chief,
Private, because the utilities, those are private
Yeah.
corridors and rights of way, so yeah.
Yeah.
There was a piece of legislation proposed in the current legislative cycle that described funding for red cedar mitigation. Don't know if that one survived all the way.
So there used to be money available for that, and we were hot and heavy on that. We actually had firefighters on their days off that kind of worked in those programs and had equipment to take those out. That money kind of comes and goes, so we're hopefully that legislation stays active and that money becomes available. Those are good programs for private individuals to go after, certainly.
I sat on that, I was on the East Red Cedar Board for Oklahoma for a while. We tried to keep the money going, it just couldn't keep it up. I don't know what it was. They
And,
don't use it for more of a pellets and like coal than it was to like, just give us money to cut it and we'll talk about what we're gonna do later.
Wanted to highlight the efforts of the fire chief. It was most recently reflected in our ISO ratings, and Norman enjoys the best ISO out there in the urban areas, and a solid ISO in the rural areas. But the chief set up auto aid agreements with several neighboring fire departments. So when the bell goes off, they're automatically going to respond to Norman, and we reciprocate. Unfortunately, on March 14th, everybody was fully involved, and there wasn't anybody to come to help because they were asking us for help, and we were asking them for help. And every piece of rolling stock we had and every firefighter we had was on a hose or in a truck, and that's the perfect storm. We couldn't account for that Easter Sunday size event. Usually we manage, but when you have something that's as widespread as what we saw on the 14th, we did everything we could with what we could get our hands on. And I think we lost 7 homes. How many acres do we know? How many acres went up?
How many that day?
No, it's bumping above that. It depends on some of the data, how you look at it, but I would say it's estimated over right about 1,000, I would think right now.
Big deal.
It's a large fire, but not 2012. That was quite a day. That was August. I think it hadn't rained in some time at over 100 degrees for a month. And it actually started down in Slaughterville, and it was something. So we only lost 1 life that day. Our fire department did a fantastic job. We were out there for several weeks, and eventually it runs out of fuel. You see it goes into Lake Thunderbird there, and that helped stop the fire. So, but no, it was quite a day.
I worked that one with Southern Baptist Disaster Relief, and it was the nightmare that kept on coming.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
It was really something.
It's really admirable to be able to have this conversation, you guys doing the work that you do. It's very much appreciated. I'd like to involve particularly FCT Shawnee and the Potawatomi in, because they're extremely interested in keeping their people safe on the east side of Lake.
Yeah.
And I totally agree.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody.
They're welcome at the table anytime they would like to come.
I'll talk to Ted and see what he wants to do.
Yeah. We've worked very well with them through the years.
Oh.
Got a good relationship.
They're wonderful people. Well, thank you very much.
You bet.
Yes, sir.
So would you probably say that it's a good idea to limit our urban footprint into the eastern area? And if we do, we need to be more strict about it when it comes to wildfire mitigation and allowing housing developments to not have a buffer between them and things that could cause problems like this.
I don't think it's about limiting. You can't limit. We're growing. So we're just gonna have to, I think maybe coding up, looking at how, when an HOA gets established, or a new community rather, maybe it's gated. What does that look like? Should they be putting buffers in versus should it be outside their area? That's gonna be the conversations. I don't think limiting the sprawl is ever gonna happen. I think it's just how it's gonna happen. I think really looking at, like Chief talked about, the education for them. We just haven't emphasized enough. You can educate all the homeowners you want, but when a builder puts a community at risk without mitigation, then that's where the problem lies. So, but there's ways to do that. There's you can put barriers. You can have 50, 100 yards. It just depends on how you design these communities, as well as ingress egress. Is there enough? I mean, I know there's all these codes, but as you're gonna have to keep changing the code. I don't know. Like, what's that look like?
Or, our long-range plan does aim to not eliminate more growth, but into that area, but slow it down and limit it to how far. So say we can, we decide whether to approve zoning changes or not to allow suburban development to encroach on that area. Based on something like this, should we allow suburban or urban development in certain areas of Eastern Norman or anywhere that are high hazard like this?
It's only high hazard because we haven't done the mitigation. Once mitigation happens, you can put them anywhere. And maybe something to think about it we've seen in the past is, oddly it's to say, but a buffer could be commercial. Your commercials are at a higher standard. So is it putting commercial on the edge of the sprawling community? Again, home hardening is one of the major things we've seen. Is home hardening, getting the education piece. It's the ember casting that's going to cause the fire. It's not so much the fire is going to run and hit a house. It's the ember casting.
I know there were houses in the Palisades that didn't get touched or didn't have any problems with this. I think it's also a good case for utilities and burying utility lines. Most of them they use wooden poles, so I can't imagine those are helpful if there's a fire. And so I think that's a good case to make for continuing to push for that when it comes to utility companies or things like that. And then, does it, I know there's a point where it doesn't matter how well the fire hydrants are working. If there's a big enough fire, our fire department can't, or if there were several of them at once going on, like was happening out there, there's a point where we can't manage it, right? And so I imagine out there where there's more fuel, there's less fire hydrants, and I know we don't have an airplane or anything, so.
Yeah, just less water infrastructure, period. But those
Even though
tanker
there's a lake, but.
vehicles are our best weapon that we have access to.
I will say, Chris and his bunch do a great job. I am absolutely confident in the municipal water supply system. When you get past 48th or 60th East, certainly we're very grateful for the public safety sales tax too. And with that was the apparatus replacement program. And what we did was we designed pumpers with 3,000 gallons on the back. A general fire engine is going to carry 500 to 750 gallons. We were able to order, and we saved money in the plan by doing it. We ordered 2 pumper tankers that went to stations 5 and 6, 3,000 and both those apparatus are going to be going to a grass fire generally, and certainly a house fire out there. We got a tanker, a dedicated tanker that holds 3,000 gallons at Station 9. And then we've got these auto aid agreements on structure fire response, but they're generally available if we have a grass fire and we go, like the city manager said, Daryl said, we will go reciprocate that. So we bring a lot of water, and that was reflected in, certainly when you're talking ISO, that's more structure fire response. Just before I became fire chief, we were a 3.9. So we were a 3 in the city area and a 9 out east. 10's the worst rating. So we were a split rating of 3.9. With public safety sales tax 1, we went to a 2.5 in our next rating. And then when we were able to get these pumper tankers on board and they saw how much water we were bringing, we were able to use some of those apparatus back in town and reincorporate some of our ladders to make them dedicated ladders. So you have more exposure protection in town to handle some of the wooded areas, or some of out west, some of the wood roofs that still are out there. We talk about public education. We've gotten a lot of those off. You're seeing more asphalt or slate roofs out west. But when you combine all that, we're now a 1-3. So we're now a 3 in that rural area where we were in the city. And a lot of that's based on just how much water we're able to bring and how much we've worked hard at really developing good relationships with our partners around us. But again, a plan like this really would go a long way in bringing extra money, bringing third-party contractors in and dedicating them to some of those efforts out there. I think it would really help.
Yeah, how long does one of those tankers last if the hose is just on full blast? How many gallons a minute, I guess?
It depends on what nozzle we're shooting it out of. If you got a master stream on top, those things are blowing out 1,000 gallons a minute, so it's gonna go pretty quick.
4 minutes. Okay.
We'll utilize that. They've got remotes inside so they can target where they're pre-treating something or fighting a fire. A general hand line is gonna anywhere from 150 to 250 gallons a minute, so you can do quite a bit of good with those, and it'll put out quite a bit of water. So they've made a huge difference, and certainly West, I mean, several times. I know that the price of these is rather astounding. You know, we've got another aerial coming in May of 2026. Price tag was 1.89 just for the apparatus, and we've got another couple $100,000 dedicated loose equipment. But I've seen those things pay for themselves in one night. Brookford Square, that's caught on fire several times, and they'll save that amount of property in an hour. I've seen that happen. So not that the city's recuperating that money, but from a public service standpoint, it's money, in my opinion, money well spent. We'll have 2 of those in service by next year, and that'll certainly continue to help with our ratings and certainly help with protection. Those unfortunately aren't usable out east. You need hydrants. You generally, to run those big ladders, because you're talking 2,000 gallons a minute up there, so we need hydrants. But we're able to bring a lot of water east now. We're doing a lot better. Hopefully someday, as the budget gets better, we'll be able to add more stations. People and money is kind of what solve a lot of these problems, and so we'll keep striving for that.
Thanks, Chief.
You bet.
Yes.
I was just gonna say also in the long range plan, there's a zoning update and subregs as well in the forecast. So if some of this is about building code, there's that. And then also we have engineering design criteria for Scott. But that might be a place to update those types of things. So if we get a grant and proceed with this, we'll have overlap in our other areas to make sure that the suggestions get implemented. Okay. All
Any more
right.
questions? Thank you very much.
Real quick.
Oh, yes, sir.
In the scope of these that you've seen before for a project this size, dollar amount, what is it to mitigate an area like what we're talking about? And I'm not gonna bring this up later, I'm just curious what your opinion is now.
I mean, we're talking a few thousand acres. I would shoot for 3 to 5 million if you could, and take what they give you. It's always shoot higher than you should. I mean, I think, I'm not sure what the California one was for PG, and I think it was like a couple $100 million. They got 10. It's like there's a skill of economy there, and I think that's really what you gotta. Don't make it so unrealistic though that they just kind of laugh at it. So you really got to do the numbers. You got to look. I mean, that might be too high, but taking it acre by acre and area concern by area concern, we may have missed some. There may be more that's added. So it's going to take a lot of planning for sure. It's hard to put a number on anything unless you're really diving down into the weeds of it. What you're going to actually do, like we talked about, are we going to do mastication? Is that 3,000 acres fully mastication, or is it burning? That's a polar opposite cost. It's going to go from $30 an acre to $900. So take that times 3,000 to 4,000 acres.
Okay.
I wish I could give you the right number.
I was looking for a range.
Yeah.
We better